All right, it's clearing up. Let me close a couple things here. And let me share my screen. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
You bring up the chat here on one side and minimize this. And let me hide this over here. Okay. All right, excellent. Welcome. Let's see, we are starting our 6th week. So we're almost halfway through the semester. And so all next week will be our midterm. Very much like the quizzes that we've had throughout the semester. We're going to make it available for a couple of days starting next Friday. I'll make it available all weekend so that you have a chance to take it anytime you like during either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And it'll be much longer. Obviously, it'll be about 2-3 hours long, and it'll be open book just like the quizzes have been, and you can decide when to take it anytime during the weekend. We will have a review next Tuesday, where we're gonna go over some past exams, and I am going to make available several questions from previous exams, and so you can take a look at the types of questions you can expect. Um, and then that Friday you'll be able to take that exam on your own. Also, so yeah, next Tuesday we'll do a review over the material, and then on Friday of the exam, um, we'll cover the final project. We'll talk about what is expected of the final project, and some sample projects that you might want to work on. Let's see, something on the chat says, wait, sorry, is the exam this weekend or next weekend? Next weekend, not this weekend, next weekend. I think I might be getting my classes switched. No, yeah, next weekend. Yeah, originally I had it was going to be this weekend, but looking at the calendar, it was originally this whole course was supposed to start a week earlier in the year, and then towards but because of COVID, they eliminated the spring week, and so that kind of changed a little bit some of the dates on when things were going to happen. It says when are the answers of quiz 3 going to be? Yeah, we'll release all the quizzes answers today so that you can take a look at that as well. What else? Yeah, so that's the next week. Today the an assignment is due today, DB5, and today we're going to introduce DB6, which is programming the database. So we'll talk about that today. Also later this week on Friday, you have quiz number 4, which is updating the database, of which you'll be asked about inserting, updating, deleting a database. So that's going to go out this Friday. And again, you'll have all Friday and then all Saturday to decide when to take that quiz on your own. What else? I think that's it. That's about it for administrative things. On the syllabus, I believe all the dates are correct. Let's see. We have today, February 23rd. We're doing programming the database, functions, store procedures, triggers. That's the link for the assignment, DB6, which is due March 2nd. I think that's correct. And then later on this week, we'll talk about other ways of programming the database, and the quiz number 4 later this week and weekend. And next weekend we'll do the exam. We'll talk about the projects, right? And the exam will be on Friday, and then all weekend. All right. Any questions? All right. If there are no questions, we're gonna talk about the upcoming assignment that is again due next Tuesday, right? So as always, I'll first demo the part of the assignment that we're giving you, right, and as a guide, and then you can use that as an example on how to go and complete the second half of the assignment to do something similar. Okay. So this is the assignment. It's called Programming Relational Databases, right? And so, up to this point, the way we've been interacting with database is through using SQL queries, inserts, updates, deletes, and using a language which is largely static or declarative, right? You're saying that, hey, I want this piece of information from that table where this is, these are all the parameters by which I want you to filter the data, right? And how do I want to group it, and how I want certain records related to other records. So you're establishing you're declaring what it is that you want from the database, right? But it's fine for non-programmers, right, that have this very high level abstraction of how the data is structured. But us programmers, right, we know that if we had, if we had a full-blown programming language, right, we can certainly be able to implement so much more sophisticated types of queries. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. We're going to give you a full-blown programming environment where you can implement very, very powerful algorithms for interacting and manipulating the data, as complicated and sophisticated as any software engineering project as you can imagine, right? Applying all the software engineering analysis that you've come to appreciate as part of your software engineering career. So first we'll start off with importing a database, right? This is almost the same database that you've had from previous assignments. I've only added just a couple more records for the posts and for the blogs, a couple more users, but it's essentially the same database that we've been using, right? So you're going to download it. You're going to head over to my GitHub repository and you're going to download. And when you open it up, right, it's going to create a directory for you, right? So we're gonna import the content of that directory. So let's see. So let me close this. This is from the previous section. So let me close this. Don't save. Let me close all this. There we go. Oh yeah, okay. And also let me remove a couple things from the previous section. Let me I'm going to blow away these views. We'll just drop those two. Let's say drop now. I'm going to drop these procedures, which we're going to build right now. I'll demo how to build these procedures as part of the assignment. We'll create a couple of functions as well. All right, there we go. We're going to drop all those. So we'll create them from scratch. Okay. All right, so we're going to import the database we just downloaded. Right, so we're going to go to servers. We're going to say import. And this is the same way that you've been doing it so far, right? So you can navigate to where these are. And I believe it's in the downloads, and it was DB Design 3. We say open, and we say start import. So it's just going to copy that over into our local database, right? So we're done. Let's close that. And I've just added just a couple more blogs, right? Added a couple more posts, right? And maybe a couple of more ratings. Okay, and that's about it, right? But other than that, it's pretty much the same database that we've been using for the last month or so. Okay. All right, so let's go back. So once you've done that, right, we're going to be using the same schema that we've been using for the last month or so. And for this assignment, we're being asked to answer these two questions, right? One of them is which blogs are popular, and the other one is which posts are popular. Okay. And so I'm going to show you how to answer the first question. And then all the source code and this analysis that we're going to do for answering this first question, you're expected to be able to answer the second question on your own, right? Based on what I'm going to demo for the first question, right? Same schema as before. But just to point out that to be able to answer this question, we need to look at the schema that we have, that we're given, right? We have the blogs up here, we have the posts, right? We have the ratings. And if you notice, right, answering what blogs are popular, that's a little bit of a vague question, right? We need to define, well, what do you mean by popular? What does it even mean? So we're gonna be a little more specific about what it means to be popular, and it's going to mean that we're gonna take a look at the ratings, right, the likes and scores, and use that to determine whether a blog is popular or not, or that a post is popular or not. We're going to say that a blog is popular, right, if the average likes for a blog, right, is higher than the average likes across all blogs, right? So if you have an above average number of likes than other blogs, then you're popular, right? But to be able to answer that, notice that the likes is related to the posts, not to the blog, right? So the ratings are for posts, and then posts are for blogs. So to be able to answer whether a blog is popular, we need to be able to answer first whether a post is popular, right? So we need to average out all the ratings grouped by a particular post. And then across all these posts for a particular blog, we can then aggregate that up to the blog. And that's exactly what we're going to do to be able to answer this first question, right? So that analysis is coming up in a minute, right? Now, all the work that we're going to be doing, all the queries, all the select statements, any inserts, updates, deletes, whatever, right? All those are going to be stored, right, in a file called popular blogs, right? And that's the one we're going to do here together, you and I here as part of this assignment. And then once we've shown you how to do that, you're expected to do on your own popular posts.sql, right? And in there, you're going to do all the SQL statements that you're going to need to be able to answer which posts are popular. Okay. All right. So let's focus on this first part, right? Is determining popular blogs. So how do we determine popular blogs? So as I mentioned earlier, it's a little vague, right? When you say, which blogs are popular, you need to be a little more specific on what do you mean by something being popular. So we're going to instead answer this other related question, which is going to be based on averaging how many likes there are for a specific blog, right? So if we can determine the average numbers of likes for a specific blog, we can then compare it against the average number of likes for all blogs, right? If it's higher, then it is popular. Otherwise, it's not popular. Okay, so basically, to be able to answer this high-level question, we need to be able to answer two related questions, right? What is the average number of likes for a specific blog? And then what is the average number of likes across all blogs, right? So we need to be able to compute those two first before we can answer the first one. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's focus on that first one, and then we'll focus on the second one. All right. So how do we compute the average number of likes for a given blog? Well, if we look at the data structure, right, we realize that the likes is counted or is captured inside of the ratings table. The table is the one that has the likes. Okay. and it has the likes for posts, not blogs. Right? So to be able to calculate the blogs, we first have to calculate the posts and then roll up the posts to their blog. Make sense? Right. So how do we roll up by posts? Well, if we look at the here we have various posts. So these are 3 posts for blog number 1, right? These are 3 posts for blog number 2, and these are 3 posts for blog number 3. See that? Okay. And they are, I've used coloring to denote that yellow is for blog number 1, blue is for blog number 2, and red is for blog number 3. Okay. And so these are 3 posts in blog number 1. Now, if we look at the ratings for each one of these posts, we see that we have 3 ratings for post number 1. We have 3 ratings for post number 2. We have 3 ratings for post number 3. See that? Okay. And notice that for each rating has a like or an unlike, a 0. Okay. So we could determine the likes for a particular post by averaging out, how many likes are there for group by the post, right? So if you average that out, it comes out to be 0.33, right, for post number 1. Same thing for post number 2, right? You average out the likes grouped by the post, and you have 0.33. This one has two likes, right? So if you average that out, it comes out to be 0.66667, right, for post number 3, and so on and so forth, right, for each one grouped by post number 2, post number 3, post number 4. Make sense? Okay. All right. Once we have calculated, right, all the averages per post, we could then, just like we group by the post to calculate the averages for a specific post, we can then group by the blog, right, to calculate the average for the blog, right? But first, let's focus on the post first, right? So let's see. So the average number of likes for a given blog. So how do we do that? Well, first, we need to do it per post, right? We're going to average out. We're going to average out the likes grouped by the posts from the ratings table. You see that, right? So let's do that query. Let's copy that. Let's copy that and bring it over. And in the query, we're going to paste that in. Okay, and there we have it, right? So if we run that, right, notice that this says that for our 4 groups of posts, right, these are the averages per post. Okay, and we're going to save this, and the naming that we are asking you to use of the file, we're going to call it popular blog SQL. Right, so that's the name of the file, and you're going to submit this as part of your assignment. Say replace. There we go. There we go. All right, so that's the first one. So we've determined the average likes per post. Very good. Now since I have that, basically it's these values right here, these values, right? Because we need to roll those up for the blog, right? That means that this intermediate result, we're going to use it as the output of all these averages. We're going to use it as an input into calculating it for the blogs. Yes, right? So we could do it a couple of ways, right? This could be an inner query of an outer query, right? It could be an inline view, or better yet, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a view out of it. We're going to create a view. So basically, this view down here is going to be this exact same select statement. There it is. See that? It's the same exact select statement, but we're going to put it inside of a view so that we can reuse this, right, as if it were a table. Okay, right, and so that we can use it. All right, so let's do that. Let's copy the view. Copy the view, and then we can create the view over here. We can say right-click, create the view, and let's paste it in here. There it is. And if we apply, basically it's that query, but now it has a name, right? Average likes per post, right? Notice that if I use it here, so if I run this, I get this result. But if I use a view instead, select star from what I call the view, I forget. The view is called average likes per post, right? So from average likes per post, there we go. You run that, notice that it returns exactly the same value, right? But it's inside of a view that I can treat it as if it were a table. Okay, perfect, excellent. Let's save that. Let's move on. Right now, we can use the results from that view to roll up and calculate the average likes for the blog, right? So we can roll it up to our parent, the blogs, right? So we can use that view that we just named, that we just created, right, as a subquery, right, or as an inline view, right, to calculate the same but for the blog, so that we can group by the blog, right? So let's copy that here, paste it, and let's take a look at it real quick. Right, so basically what we're doing here is that, right, we are we're taking that view that we just create, this view, same view, right, and we are going to join it, right? So notice that it has the post ID. See that it has got the post. We're going to join it, the post ID, with the post table, right? So that I know what post they're relating to, because I can then use that to join it with the blogs. See that? So that now I know which blogs it belongs to. And I can group by the blog. So I can say, okay, well, these two are for blog number 1, and these are for blog number 2. And I can group them together and average these two out and average these two out together. Okay? Right? So if I run that, oops. Okay, there we go. So we have two blogs, blog number 2 and blog number 3. And this results is basically the averaging of the averages per blog, per post, right? And I've grouped them and aggregate them to calculate and roll it up into the blog that it belonged to. Make sense? All right. Now this is also a useful query that I can just put inside of a view. I'm going to put this inside of a view. Oops. So I'm going to copy that. And oops. I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, so it's a select statement from before. And we're going to call it the average likes per blog. Average likes per blog. Okay, I think I've copied it correctly, right? BID, blog ID. Oh, I call this, okay, so I call this blog ID. That's the difference here. I forgot the as here. There we go. Other than that, I believe it's the same. Average, blah, 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 yada, yada. Okay, yeah, so it says the same thing, right? Actually, let me just copy it just in case. I want to make sure that what I'm giving you works. Okay, so I'm just going to replace it. Very good, like that. And let me just clean it up a little bit. Just clean it up a little bit. Okay, there we go. Okay. From blah, 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 where, yada, 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 and put that in a separate line. Okay. Yeah, so basically it's that same query, but wrapped into a reusable view. Right, so I'm going to say apply. Right, so I have that view. Now that view, I can use it. I can use that view to ask things such as, well, since now you know the averages per blog, well, I can ask you for a specific blog, what is the average of averages, right? And that's going to allow me to answer my first question, or part of my first question, right? So for blog number 2, right, I have 0.666 something or other. For number 3, I have 0.71, right? Which is part A of my original question, right? Which is I want to be able to get the average number of likes for a specific blog, right? I can just use here 3 or 2 or whatever ID for blog do I want to calculate for, right? But instead of using this independently as a query, it'd be nice if this were a function, right? That I can call it and pass this value as a parameter, a parameterized function, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to grab that query and we're going to put it instead of a function. Looks like the store procedure that I forgot to remove. Drop that. Okay. All right, so let's create a function. And so the function in here, we're just going to paste. I'm going to paste that select statement in there. Paste the select statement, and instead of this hard-coded 3, we're going to take an argument. We're going to take an argument here, and of type integer, and then we're going to use this. We're going to use this as a variable here. Let's see what did I use? Blog ID. Da, 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 da. Okay, there's the function. Let me copy the function. Let me copy the function. There we go. Yeah, so we're using blog ID as an input. Here's the where clause. Here's the select statement. Right, here's the select statement. Let me break it up a little bit so it's easy to read. Here's the select that we had earlier, right? Select from the rolled up averages per blog, right? And then we're going to, right, which one do we want? We don't want all of them. We only want the record where the blog ID, right, is equal to the blog ID that I'm passing as an argument. Okay. Then this might come back with multiple records, right? Although it shouldn't, because it was grouped by ID, so it should return just that one. But I'm making sure it only returns one thing, right? So I'm saying limit 1. I'm guaranteeing that I will never get more than just one record here, right? Also, this notice that I'm retrieving just one single field here, right? So I have one record, right, and one field. So basically one single data, right? And that data, presumably, it should be a float, okay? Right? It should be this float, that float right there, okay, that one float, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to store it in a local variable. So I'm declaring here a local variable called average likes, and I'm storing this select statement, right? Whatever it evaluates to, presumably 0.77 something or other, I'm going to put it inside of my local variable. And finally, I'm going to return that local variable as the final result of this function. Make sense? Ever still with me? Right? Okay, so let's apply the function. There it is. I created the function. Now that I have the function, I should be able to just invoke it. I can say, just like this allowed me to do the averages likes for block number 3. I should now just be able to say select average likes for blog. That's what we called it, right? So this one, average likes for blog, right? I think I spelled it right. And I should be able to just say 3. I should be able to run it, and it comes back with 3. There it is, right? And then 0.771, right? It gives me the same result as calling this hard-coded value of 3, or this would be 2, right? And that returns the 0.6607. Same thing if I put a 2 here, right? I run it, and it gives me the same value, 0.66607. See that? Excellent. So that answers my part A of my overall question. What is the average number of likes for a given blog? I still need to answer part B. Right? Part B is, what is the average number of likes for all the blogs? Right? Remember, if I answer those 2 questions, I can then answer my question number 1, right? Because I can compare now these 2 values and say, well, which one is more popular? Okay. So to calculate across all blogs, I could use the same exact view that I just used before, but instead of returning the values for a specific blog, I can just average out all the values, right? Overall, what is the average across all blogs? right? And then come back with a single value, and that would give me the overall average across all blocks, right? So if I do that, right, that gives me that across all blogs, right, the average is 0.6 something 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 or other, right? Sorry, 0.6888675, right? Yeah, so that's the average across all blogs. So any blog who has an average likes above that is popular. Anybody who has below that is not popular. Okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to create a function. We're going to wrap this inside of a function. Right? We're going to take that select from, right, and we're going to put it inside of a function so that we can then use both functions for part A and the other function for part B, and then be able to answer, well, which blogs are have a higher average likes. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create another function. Let's create yet another function and refresh here. So function, create the function, and let's paste that in there, and let's just take a look at it real quick. Right, so basically it's the query that we just had, right? This query, right? Take a average out all the likes per blog, so average them out, and then store it in a local variable called average likes, right? Which is a local variable that I've declared here that is then returned as the calculation of all the likes across all blogs. Okay. Right, which is basically this query right here. It's the same query, but it's wrapped inside of a function so that I can use it, and I call it, for instance, I would like to use it instead of a where clause. Okay, let's apply that. Okay, once we have that, now I can take both of my functions, right, this brand new function I just created plus the one I created earlier, and then I can create this query that says, hey, get me all the blogs whose average likes are greater than the average likes across all blogs, which is perfect. That's exactly the answer that I want to be able to answer, right? It's a question. That's the answer to the question I want to answer, right? So if I take the blogs, from the blogs, I'm going to grab the name of the blog, right? And then use the function here in the select statement to come up with the average likes for that specific blog. Call that function, but then use it here also in the where clause to determine, which one is greater than the average likes of blogs. See that? So let's run that, right? So it tells me that SpaceX, right, which has an average likes, right, is of 0.7166 something, is greater than the average likes across all blogs. So it's the most popular blog. Make sense? All right, excellent. Yeah, so that, having done that, we save that. We're going to provide this as one of the deliverables for this assignment. Having done that, on your own, this part of now you try it, right? You're gonna use what we've provided here as a guide to completing your own assignment, right? So for your assignment, what you're gonna do is that you're gonna answer the question of which posts are popular, right? And so again, we need to be able to be a little more specific. What do we mean by a popular posts, right? What does it mean for a blog to be popular? And in our case, so for the blogs we use the likes, right? So what you're going to do for your case, right? A popular blog is going to be defined as posts. A popular post is going to be defined as posts with an average score, so score, not likes, an average score higher than the average score, right, across all blogs, right, as opposed to likes across blogs. You're going to do scores across posts, right? So this one's a little bit easier. So it's the same. It's the same in that, right, instead of the likes, you're going to do posts, right? But basically the same query that we did earlier is going to be very, very similar, but instead of likes, you're going to do scores, right? But it's easier in that we only ask you to do it at the level of the post. We don't ask you to roll that up to the level of the blog, right? So you're going to group those scores and average them out per post, okay? But we're not asking you to roll them up per blog, right? So you're going to stay down at the post level, and you're going to create a view that is going to have the average scores per post, right? And so for instance, we're not asking you, for instance, the average score per blog. We're not asking you for that, right? Only for posts. And then we are asking you to create two functions. One, to create the score for a given post, right? And then average score for across all posts, right? And then you're going to create a select statement like this one, which is going to be able to tell you which posts, right, have a average score for blog greater than average score for all the posts, right? And you'll be able to answer, which posts are the most popular posts. That make sense? Is it clear what we're asking you to do? All right, I'll take that as a yes. All right, so let's move on. All right, so here we're practicing several things, right? We're from what we've saw, right? We're practicing how to do averaging, right, and do group by so that we can roll up values into higher values, right, and roll up multiple layers, right? So you're learning how to do that, which is very, very important. We're also learning how to use views, right, to store or represent intermediate results, right, so that you can then be able to answer higher and higher, more sophisticated types of questions. Okay, and we're teaching you how to use functions, right, so that you can wrap inside of a function that can be invoked and parameterized, right, so that you can reuse certain useful queries, right, so that you don't have to so you can automate a lot of repetitive queries that otherwise you would have to write out entirely. Okay, so three very important skills are being addressed by this right now. Okay, that's very, very important. So the next set of skills that we want you to play around with, right, is working with store procedures, right? So store procedures. So unlike functions, right, where functions you can use them, right? Check this out. I mean, you can use functions in the select statement. You can use them in the where clause, and that's their beauty, right? That you can you can invoke them in the where and the select statement, right, and use them to compare values and whatnot, right? Very, very nice, very cool. Now, store procedures are not meant to be used that way, right? They're not meant to be, give me a value, I'm going to compare it against something, and I'm going to make decisions. Those are for functions, okay? Store procedures instead are more like scripts, right? Where, you have a very useful set of inserts and updates and deletes and you might embed it inside of some sophisticated algorithm that has a lot of if statements and while loops and branching and whatnot. Okay, that calculate or generate data or massage the data and do some updates, some very, very powerful updates, right? And you want to reuse these algorithms, and you can parameterize them, right? And you can just and you can give them some useful names, some meaningful names, so that you don't have to remember what's inside of the algorithm. The name says it all, right? And so after a while, you implement several of these procedures that make your productivity using a database much better. Okay, so store procedures are for creating a collection of scripts, right, that you can just rattle out and type real quick and be very, very productive interacting with databases. So here we're going to implement some useful store procedures, right, that are in general fairly useful and fairly common that you might want to use from day to day, right? Also, they're designed to be looking forward towards where we're going in the next couple of weeks when we start looking at implementing similar procedures, but outside of the database. Okay, right now we're implementing all this inside of the database, and everything's running inside of the database, right? Using Workbench as our IDE. But starting next week, right, we'll start thinking about how is it that we can interact with the database, but from outside of the database using programming languages such as Python or C# or Java or any other programming language, and be able to network and connect to this. But that's all starting maybe this Friday, but certainly next week. Okay. So first, let's see how we would implement some of these scripts. Some of them are really trivial, right? And some of them are a little bit more interesting. So we'll create these for you. We'll give you the source code for you to create these, and then we're going to ask you to implement these on your own. All right. So first, we'll create some really simple scripts for retrieving all the blogs, retrieving a particular blog, giving its primary key, retrieving all the blogs for a particular user, creating a blog, right, for a specific user, updating a blog, deleting a blog, and creating some random blogs, a whole bunch of random blogs. Okay? Okay. Very good. So let's create the first couple of these store procedures. So here's the first one. So this first one, we're going to create a procedure called find all blogs, right? That, like the name suggests, it just retrieves the content of blogs. So let's do that. So if we go and we go to the store procedures here, we right click on that, we say create store procedure, and we're going to paste that in there. And there it is. So basically it's, we might have found that this, we're lazy and we don't want to type the select star from blog. So instead we prefer to think about it as a function or as an executable, right? So find all blogs, right? So we apply, that gets defined, and then from within your query, you can then run it. You can say call your what's the name of the procedure? Find all blogs, paste, right? And if we run that, indeed, it comes back with all the blogs. There they are. Okay. Now this is more programmatic, right? It makes us really think the way we software engineers think about being able to execute an algorithm, right, and reusable code, right, and embedded inside of a reusable method, right? So it allows us to think in that way. Let me say that. And so let's do down another one. Let's do find blogs if we know the primary key. So let's do that. Let's create another store procedure. And let's paste it in there. And there it is. So it's the same thing as before, right? But right, we are retrieving a specific blog if we know the blog's primary key. Okay, so let's apply. And then from our popular blogs, we can retrieve, right, a specific blog. So find blog by its primary key ID. And let's do number 3. Oops. What happened? No. So that's all of them. Let's run number 3. What's going on? Find. Oh, find. No, find. There we go. There it is. So blog number 3. It's SpaceX. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we can retrieve that specific blog. Very good. How about finding all the blogs for a specific user? How's that? Let's do that. So let's create a store procedure and say create store procedure, and we're going to post in here the store procedure, right? Again, same thing, right? We're just selecting for blogs where the user ID is user ID, right? So let's apply something that we would write. All right. So let's try it here, and let's take a look at again all the blogs. just to see the various users that have written all these blogs. Let's see, 3, 4, 4, 6, 6. So let's retrieve the blogs for user number 4, which should return SpaceX and Tesla. So let's do that. So call find blogs for user, and then number 4, run, and indeed it returns those 2. So yeah, so that worked. Okay, so again, this allows you to think in a functional mindset as opposed to necessarily thinking about SQL, right? You encapsulate all the logic in SQL in a reusable method like this, or procedure, right? So that you can just run it anytime you want. All right, so let's do something a little more interesting. Being able to create a brand new blog for a given user. Okay, so let's see. So let's create a brand new store procedure. So let's paste that in there. Okay, and this takes as parameters, it takes the ID of the user for which you are creating the particular blog, the new blog name, and the topic. Okay, and then it's just going to insert into the blogs, right, those values. All right, excellent. So we're going to apply that. Okay, there we go. Excuse me. So let's try running it. So we're going to call that brand new store procedure for user. Well, let's wait a minute. Let's let me see what all the blogs that we have. Okay. 3, 4, 4, 5. And what users do we have? What users do we have? Anyone not have any blogs? User. Let's see. We have okay, so Charlie Brown doesn't seem to have any blogs, right? We have Charlie Brown doesn't seem to have any blogs, right? So okay, so let's create some blogs for Charlie Brown. Oops. So let's remove that. So for Charlie Brown is number 5. The blog is going to be called say B1, right? And the topic is space, right? Okay. And so let's try it out, right? Let's see. Let's run it. Okay, and let's try and find all the blogs, see if Charlie Brown is there. There we have B1, and then we have number 5. And for the user number 5, let's see if indeed we have Charlie Brown. Yep, space. And we can create a whole bunch of these, right? So let's create B1, let's create B2, maybe B2, B3, B4. Okay, so let's do that. So let's create that one. Let's create another one, 3 and 4. And then let's get all the blogs for Charlie Brown. And Charlie Brown has those 4 new blogs. Perfect, excellent. Yes? All right, let's do a couple more here. Let's see. All right, so we created. How about updating a blog? Let's update a blog. So let's create a store procedure for that. So create the procedure. I'm going to paste that in there. And basically, I can update a blog. If you give me the ID of the blog, I can change its name and I can change its topic. Okay? All right, so let's do that. Right? So say I want to change a couple of Charlie Brown's blogs that I just created. Right? I want to change their name and their topic. Right? So let's use the store procedure update blog in the query and say call update blog for blog number, say 10 here, right? Blog number 10, and the new title or name will be B111, right? And the topic instead of space is cars. Okay, and so let's run that. Okay, and let's take a look at again all the blogs for user number 5. And we see that indeed blog number 10, we were able to change it to B111. Okay. And how about deleting a blog? Let's do that. Let's grab that and let's create a store procedure. right? And let's for that particular blog, we're going to apply that. There we have it, right? And then we can delete a particular blog and say delete blog if you give me the ID of the blog. So let's delete maybe number B3 over here. So we can say, call delete blog and ID number 11. And if we run that and then go look up all the blogs for number 5, we see that blog number 11 is gone, right? And finally, let's do one of the more interesting ones. This one's going to create a number of random blogs using a loop, right? So let's take a look at this, right? So the procedure is called create random blog, right? And it takes 2 parameters. One is the int, right? How many random blogs do you want? And the blogs are created by this user, right? The user ID. So in this case, maybe it will create a couple random blogs for Charlie Brown, right? We know the user ID is 5. So internally, we're going to declare a couple of variables, right? Intermediate variables. These are local variables to the procedure. They're not global. They're local here. One, we're going to use it for indexing in a loop. Right? So we're going to create a while loop that's going to iterate, right, from 0 all the way to count -1. Okay, and then we're going to create a random postfix, right? So we're going to create a number between 0 and 100, right, using rand. Okay, we're going to calculate a number between 0 and 100, and then we're going to concatenate that prefix with a hard-coded piece of text, right? We're going to create a blog name, random blog name, right? And that's what we're going to insert. So here's the while loop. There's the while and the end while. So this is very much like Java's or C# while, right? As long you enter the body when this is true, and as long as this is true, you stay in the body of the while loop, right? And then we increment the counter, right? We calculate a random postfix, right, using the rand function, multiplying by 100, and then we concatenate, right? We concatenate the text random blog with the postfix, and then to calculate the name of the random blog, right? And then we just insert into the blogs table these columns, the name, topic, and user, having the random blog name, topic space, and then the user ID for the person we've just created, right? Okay, so let's apply. There we go. And having done that, we can now try it out, right? We can say, okay, well, let's call create random blogs. I want to create 5 random blogs for user, or 10 random blogs for user number 5. So I know that's Charlie Brown, right? So let's run that and see if that worked, right? So let's find the blogs for Charlie Brown, and it looks like it works, right? Notice that indeed we have 10 new random blogs with some random names, all space, right? And some default created and updated timestamps. You see that? Okay. All right. Excellent. So now that we've shown you how to create a couple of these store procedures, right? We're asking you now to, on your own, right, create the following store procedures. So just like we did it for blogs, we're asking you now to do it for posts, right? So find posts by ID, find posts by blog, for a particular blog, create posts for blog, update a post, delete a post, and create random posts. Okay? Right, so that you're going to do on your own. Now for deliverables, you're going to come back with 3 files. Right, one is the popular blogs.sql, the one that we've just been using. Right, so provide that. Also, on your own, you're going to create a popular posts.sql file, which is going to contain all the queries you might have used to explore how to calculate the popular posts. And then you're going to export the database. You're going to export the database, but this time around, you need to make sure that not only it exports tables, you've done this before, I believe, right? But also not only the tables, but also the views, right? The functions, right? The procedures, right? By default, these might not have been selected. So let me show you how to do it. Here's just a little example on how to do it in a graph, an image here that gives you a hint on what to select and what to expect. So if you go to server here, you can say export, and in the export, right, you go into object selection, you select the database that you want to export, right, and here are the tables that are normally there, right? So usually these tables might already be selected. These are views. These are the views that we created, and just make sure that they're selected, okay? And also, by default, you might not have this selected, right? This says dump store procedures and functions. Make sure that this is indeed selected, okay? We haven't worked on triggers this time around, but we'll play around with it later. But you can also select whether you want to dump the triggers as well. Okay, so if you start export, you might get a warning. That's fine, just continue anyway. Right, it's going to export it to the file, to a directory structure, zip up that directory structure, right, zip it up, and then provide it as part of your deliverables. Okay, that makes sense?
Yeah.
Any questions? All right, excellent. So let's move on here. So let's review real quick where we left off last time. We had started discussing about store procedures. We had introduced them. So let's review real quick and you formally go through the material for store procedures, functions, and triggers. We haven't talked about triggers, right? So definitely want to talk about triggers. So let's see. So just going over what we just discussed, right? So store procedures, functions, triggers, they allow us to encapsulate, tasks that might be repetitive, that we don't want to have to type it out all the time. So it allows us to apply what we call in software engineering abstraction, right? It allows us to wrap a complex algorithm inside of a identifier that can then be used to represent that complex algorithm, and then it could be parameterized, right? You can pass it parameters so that you can change the behavior of that algorithm by the input that you pass it, right? Inside you can create variables, and you have full control, full-blown use of a powerful programming language, right? We saw that there were some pros and some cons, right? That if you that definitely you have abstraction, that's the fastest that you can be without having to do a network connection, because you're running right in the same PC, the same machine, right? But then there's more things that you have to maintain, new software engineering that you have to apply to this new infrastructure, right? Yet another language that you have to learn. We saw that there were three types of executable abstractions, right? We saw that there were the functions, right, that could be used inside of select statements in the select or the where clause, that you can pass it arguments, and then that the results could be used to compare values against fields and whatnot. Oops, sorry about that. And we also saw that another type of executable was procedures, right, that were meant to encapsulate complex algorithms that are updating, deleting, inserting data into our tables, right, that you don't want to have to write all over again. You can parameterize them, but they're not meant for use in selects or where clauses. And then we have triggers, which we haven't seen yet, right? And so we'll see that they're meant for executing when a particular event occurs, and we'll see that in a minute. So functions, right? We use the create function syntax, right, where we can put the name of the function and optional parameters that we talked about delimiters, right? That we have to be able to delegate or postpone the execution of some of these SQL commands, right, that otherwise would execute right away. Right, so we changed the delimiter so that, this is important mostly when you are working at the command line, which we're not, right? We're using a user interface that is sending all these commands to the remote server, right? It's adding all these extra delimiter commands that we don't really need to. But if you were at the command line of MySQL command line, you would actually have to be very, very specific about changing the delimiter. So it's good to know. We saw that it's easy to create new functions or procedures. You can just go to the specific section inside under your schema, and you can either create a function by right-clicking on it and create a function, or store procedure. And then inside you can put your algorithm. Right here, there were some really, really simple examples of doing some really simple math, of adding 2 + 2 or adding a plus b. Right, some really, really trivial examples. We saw that we can use the functions either as part of the select or as part of the where clause, right? So that we can calculate values and compare them and use them as results lists. So that not only can we return numerical values, such as floats and integers, but we can also calculate strings or dates, right? That could be used then as part of higher level selects in select or where clauses, right? Now for store procedures, right, is slightly different, right? We say create procedure against function name, and the values that are returned, right, or what it calculates is not necessarily something that can be used in a select or where clause, right? Instead, they're meant for encapsulating algorithms that are going to manipulate the database, right? So again, to create them very easily, right-click on the store procedure, right, and then you can then paste inside your algorithm, where normally it would be just complex inserts, updates, deletes, perhaps inside loops, inside of if statements, while, right, that decide whether you should insert this or insert that or update this or update that based on some sophisticated logic that you would add in there, right? So here's a simple get all PS, right, all the persons, right, and it returns all the users, or he'll returning those graduates that are graduated after the year 2000. So this select statement, we could also parameterize it, right? Graduates after, and then you can pass an argument and then returns those graduates after a particular year. Here we're taking an argument here or parameter. I want to get the average salary for certain employees, presumably, and that are greater than a specific value, right? So it filters. So again, just simple trivial examples. Just a note that you have to be careful on, depending on which vendor you're using, right? Most of the examples that we've been looking at are based on MySQL, but certainly you should check to see based on whether you're going to use Oracle or SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, right? That each one might have specific syntax that you need to consider. Right? For instance, SQL Server uses exec and execute as opposed to call, right? So make sure that whatever vendor you end up using, right, that you become familiar with whatever syntax it is for that vendor. For modifying existing procedures, right, we use the keyword alter just like you would for a table. Most of the times when you're using alter, typically it entails dropping the old procedure and just replacing it with a new body, okay? And typically the drop entails on making sure that you verify that the procedure actually exists before you drop it, using keywords such as if exists. Otherwise, you'll get an error. So the syntax is either you use the alter procedure, right, and then you replace the body, with a brand new begin, a brand new body, right, or you just drop the old one, right, and then just recreate it brand new. So to do it from Workbench, right? You can right click on that procedure and say alter store procedure, which will create this for you, right? The drop and then you can make any changes, right? And then just recreates the procedure from scratch. All right, so parameters. So parameters. We've been using the default behavior of parameters, right? And parameters behave in 3 different ways, right? Now, 2 of the ways should be familiar to you as programmers, right? You know, if you've taken any programming course, you might be familiar with the terms pass by value and pass by reference. Okay. And what it means is that when you pass a parameter to a function, you know, it's whether that function can change the value of the original variable that you passed in. So for instance, if you have function ABC and you pass it a variable x, right? You say, you know, ABC and you pass in x, and the original value of x was 10. Right? The question is whether variable ABC is able to change the original value of x or not. Okay, we say that if a method or function ABC cannot change the variable of x, we say that it's behaving as a pass by value. If instead function ABC it can change the original value of x, we say that it's behaving by pass by reference. Okay, I'm not sure if you've heard these terms, but they're very common in programming courses. Okay, well in SQL you have the same types of considerations, right? So you can specify how a variable that is being a parameter that is being passed to a procedure, how it's going to be treated. Is it going to be treated as pass by value, or is it going to be treated as pass by reference, right? So this the way you do that is by putting the following keywords in front of your parameter, right? If you put the keyword in, right, which is the default, right? Default means that you don't even have to put the keyword in. It's treated as in. That's a default behavior. Then that means that it's going to be treated as pass by value, right? Pass by value, meaning that if you pass it a variable x to this procedure, then here what you're going to get is the value of x, and you're not going to be able to change the original variable x, right? You're being passed the value. You don't get to change the old x, the original x, right? So that's in. Then down below here, you have in out. In out behaves like pass by reference, where you're not passed the value. Instead, you are passed a reference to the variable. Okay, so when you get here the var name here, right? Whatever you do to that var name is going to be done to the original variable x, right? So if you change the value of var name, you are changing the value of the original x. Okay, right? So those 2 are behave just like you would expect in any programming language. But here, SQL provides a 3rd option. So a 3rd option is that a variable or parameter can be passed in only for the purpose of the procedure generating an output. Okay, meaning if you're passed x, okay, it's going to be treated in such a way that it's going to ignore any initial value of x, because I don't care about the input. I don't care that you're sending me data. I'm strictly going to use it so that I can return data to you. Right? I'm going to set the value of the var name. I'm going to set the value, and that value you can then read that value later. Okay, and when you return from that function, from that procedure, right? So it's strictly for me, the procedure generating an output, and I'm going to ignore any value that you might have passed me originally. Okay, so that's the 3rd behavior, right? So here's a couple illustrations on how it works, right? So here here we are declaring a variable A. Notice the @ sign here. Okay, this means that this is a user variable that you can declare from the command line. You can declare a new variable A, B, C, or whatever you want, right? But you put an @ and it's your variable. It's not any system variable. And so we're initializing it to 1, 2, 3. And we're doing select A, and it prints out 1, 2, 3 because that's the value that we've given it. That makes total sense. And now A is a variable that we're passing it to this procedure in parameter example. See that? And notice that the variable B has been declared with an in. See that? It's a default. It doesn't. We don't need to put an in there. It would have been considered as an in variable anyway, in parameter. So A here, what happens, because this is declared as an in, then B here gets the value of A. So B is going to be 1, 2, 3. Okay, notice that it takes the value. That's why it's called pass by value. So B is now 1, 2, 3. Right? Now, whatever happens to B here, right? Whether I increment it or whatever I do internally in the procedure, notice here that I am incrementing B and I'm printing it out. So indeed it's worked, right? It went up to 1, 2, 4. But then when I select A again, you'll notice that it's still just 1, 2, 3. So A has not changed, even though I changed B, which is equal to A, right? Changing B does not change the original A, right? That's typical of pass by value behavior. Okay. And then let's go on to pass by reference. So pass by reference, right? The behavior is slightly different. Right? If I declare the same variable A and I print it out, it's 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then when I pass you A, here B doesn't get the value of 1, 2, 3. Right? It doesn't get the value. Instead, it is A. So B is the same thing as A. If whatever I do to B is also going to happen to A, right? So here, if I say B is equal to B plus 1, then A is going to be A plus 1, okay? So just like B changed to 1 to 4, also B, I'm sorry, since B changed to 1 to 4, then A also will have changed to 1 to 4, right? Again, that is classical pass by reference behavior, all right? Let's see. Anything on the chat? No, nothing on the chat. Okay. There's one more though. There's one more behavior that is not common in programming language. Is the out version of this, right? The out, same thing, right? I'm going to pass A, and B doesn't even get the value of 1, 2, 3, right? I don't have access to the fact that B presumably got the value of A, 1, 2, 3. So internally, I cannot even read the value of B, right? I don't know what its value is. I don't get to see it. I don't even know that you passed me A that had a value of 1, 2, 3. So B is not 1, 2, 3, right? The only thing that I can do with B is set its value. I can write to it. I can change its value. And then A changes. But notice that I wasn't able to read it. Right? I'm not able to read it, unlike pass by, right? Unlike pass by reference, which I can read it. I can read it and I can write it. But in out, I can only write it. Right? So basically, in I can read, out I can write, and then in out I can read and write. Okay. All right. So let's talk about variables. So we just used variables here. Let's talk about variables a little more, right? So anyway, so let me just recap here. We can use in and in, right? That we can pass in an argument, and I can set I can run updates and inserts and whatnot, right? Using a procedure. A set role allows me to pass in a parameter and where I can change the role of a student or user and change it to its new role. I can pass it an argument parameter. I can also use it to iterate and over all the records and give a whole bunch of employees a raise, right, for a particular percentage, right? So update all the persons, right, whose salary was whatever, right? I want to increment it by 50%, right? So let's talk about local variables. Right, so local variables, we saw as in the example in the assignment, right? We took a look at using the keyword declare, which allows us to create brand new local variables of a particular type, integer, float, varchar, date, time, whatever, right? And give it a default value, right? We saw that example in the assignment, right? And all these are local variables, right? They don't affect anything outside the procedure, and they only have the scope of the procedure. So when you're going to declare it here, by the end of the procedure, they're gone, right? They only live as long as the procedure is executing, right? So here's just an example of creating, a couple of local variables. A as an integer, string today, right, and a couple of tiny int booleans, and then initializing some of their values. So A is being initialized to be 5. Today takes the current date time, current date, right? And tiny ints are declared here. And then we can use set keyword to modify these values locally, internally in the procedure. So here's an example where we're using it at the top of the begin. We're declaring all those variables and then changing some of their values of the string and whatnot. Okay. Now, here's a couple examples on making sure we understand what its behavior of an effect of modifying variables locally, right, and what effects it might have outside of the procedure, right? And this is to just point out that there is no effect, right? That any local variable, right, has that they modify locally, right, has no effect outside of the procedure. So, for instance, if you declare var2 here and you initialize it to 1, right? As long when it doesn't matter how many times you call the procedure, right? And whatever modifications you might do to your local variables, those local variables, those local values, and any side effect, right, dies at the end of the procedure when it ends, right? Very much like you would expect in any programming language, right? So var2, if you incremented 1, even though you might have called it many times, here's a global variable var2 equal to 1. And notice that we're incrementing both. We're incrementing the local variable 2, and we're incrementing the global variable 2, right? And notice that they both increment to 2. But if you call it again multiple times, the local variable 2 only ever goes up to 2, right? Because at the end of the procedure, it's gone, right? So there's no remembering what the previous value was, right? Instead, the global variable, right, does go up to 3, 4, 5 every time you call the procedure, right? It goes up, right? So just to point that out. Conditionals, you have a full set of structures that you would expect with a any serious programming language. You have if statements, you have switches, right? You have looping, everything you would expect from a serious programming language, right? You have if, and then you get a boolean, right? And then you have a then, where you can put the body of the if then, where you can do lots of selects and inserts and updates and deletes and combinations of them, or all sorts of branching that you would expect. You have a just like switch case, right? You have the case statements, right, that can have multiple when clauses, right, that can compare an expression against several options, right, that are constants, right? And wherever that particular expression is equal, evaluates to one of these constants, right? Then the particular insert or particular body of the when then clause is executed, right? There is a slight difference in the behavior and where how this behaves on how switch case behaves in other programming languages. In other programming languages, you have to use a break, right? Otherwise, whenever you enter a case in a switch case, right, if you don't put a break, the first case that is true, it would just fall through and execute every single statement until it reaches the end of the switch case. Not the case here, right? And when you say when, then only those statements are executed, right? It doesn't continue all to all the other ones. There's no need to put a break or anything like that here. It only executes that one statement, and then that's it. Okay. Now there's another version of this which is somewhat more powerful, where instead of having one expression, right, that gets evaluated and then compared against multiple versions of possibilities, you can instead have individual Boolean expressions so that the one that evaluates to true, right, then that particular statements are executed. Okay. And also, like the switch case, right, notice that there's an else, right, and that else behaves like the default in switch case, if none of the previous when clauses or any of the previous predicates are true, then you fall through the else and you execute that one default execution. Okay. Then you also have loops, right, that allows you to iterate, right, over a collection or set of rows or set of or counter, right, and very much like in other programming language, there are different variations of the looping structures, right? You have the while do, you have the loop, you have the repeat until, right? That roughly are equivalent to the while do and do while of our other programming languages, right? So the while do has the behavior of not executing its body unless the expression, right, is at least true the first time around, right? So it right, it executes the body of the while do, as long as this expression is true, right? It stays inside of that loop. Okay. Whereas the repeat until, right, executes its body at least once, right? It falls right through, right? It executes the body once and then stays in the body and just goes on to the next one, right? And just keeps repeating this, as long as the expression in the until, right, is true. As long as that's true, it'll stay just repeating over and over and over. Okay. And then you have the loop statement, right, that kind of allows you sort of like behave a little bit like a go-to, right, that you can just jump around. You can have several labels all throughout your code, and then depending on certain Boolean expressions, you can then just jump and and use iterate, right, to jump at different labels that you might have spread out over your code, right? Although you can't loop outside of the procedure, right? You would have to stay inside of the procedure. So it's not quite like a go-to, right, where you can just jump anywhere you want, right? You would stay inside of that procedure, or you can leave. You can break out of the loop by using the keyword leave, right, and it just jumps out of the loop where you have the end loop down here. Then you have triggers. So triggers, as I mentioned earlier, right, they allow you to encapsulate several statements, SQL statements that are going to be invoked based on certain events and conditions that might occur, right? So for instance, you can create a trigger that listens to events that occur to a particular table, right? And you want to make sure that if there's an insert or an update or delete to a specific table, you want to run the trigger, right? So it's kind of listening for certain events that occur to certain tables, right? And then you can take a look at what would happen to the record that you're trying to insert or you're trying to update, and you can look at it like a before and after, and decide whether you like that change or not. Okay, and based on some logic in the trigger, you might decide to abort the whole operation and say, no, I'm not going to accept that insert. I'm not going to accept that update. You can do some really, really powerful validation on whether you're going to go forward and accept the update or the insert or the delete, or make sure that you can also implement certain very sophisticated relationships between records, right? That you can run through your logic that that if you're inserting a brand new record, maybe you're inserting a brand new student, you also know that you have to, update a whole bunch of other places, other tables that you say, okay, well, I need to, relate that new student, and I need to make a record for financial aid, and I need to create a record for housing authority, and I need to create, a whole bunch of other things. And so, you can create some really, really sophisticated algorithms that allow you to, update and whatnot. Let's see, there's something on the chat. Is repeat the same as do while? Yeah, exactly. Yes, repeat is exactly like do while, right? Yes, very good. So here's an example of creating a trigger. This is the syntax, right? You would say, create trigger, and then the name of the trigger, just like the name of a function or name of the procedure, right? And then, when do you want this to happen? When do you want this to trigger? You can say whether you want it to trigger before or you want to trigger after the fact, right? So in the event would be insert, update, and delete. So you could say, before the insert happens, I want to run this, right? Or you can say after the insert happens, I want to run this, okay? And so you can either look at the insert and either decide to abort the insert and says, no, I'm going to do a whole bunch of validation on that insert and I don't like it. And then you can abort it and say, no, don't let that insert go through. Or you can say, well, let the insert go through and then let me know the results of the insert, right? Because I know that after doing that insert, I know that I have to do a whole bunch of other things. A whole bunch of other things have to occur, right? You can also decide on, well, obviously you have to tell what table are you listening on, right? On whether you're listening on the trigger on the students, on the enrollments or whatnot, right? To run these triggers. You can also decide that if you're inserting a whole bunch of rows or you're updating a whole bunch of rows, right? A whole bunch of records, whether you want to trigger this algorithm for each individual record that is being inserted or updated, or whether you want to take it as a whole, right? As every time you update or insert into a table, right? So whether you want to be called by every time the table is updated or when each record is updated, right? So you can say, whether you want it for each row or you want it for the table, right? So also there's a naming convention that is very common in industry where a common name is that you provide first the trigger time, meaning which is either before or after, then the table name, and then the trigger event. So for instance, it might be something like before employee update, right? Before you update the employee, I want this trigger to run, okay? So here's an example of an audit table, right? We're auditing different things that are happening to employees. Employees might get a raise, right? They might be modified and moved from one project to another project. They might be moved from one department to another department. So we want to audit what happens to employees over time, okay? And so what we could do is that we can create a trigger, right? A trigger that listens to any updates that occur on an employee, and whenever a change happens, we want to come and insert into this audit table, what happened, okay? So here we're going to create a trigger. Is going to listen on the employee table. Going to listen on the employee table, and so we want to be notified whenever there's an update on this employee table. For any records that are updated, we want to be notified, and we're going to insert into the audit table. We want to insert an action, and the action could be update or change or modified or moved or salary or whatever action we want to add here, right? And we want to grab the value of the record that is being updated, so that we can say, well, what did update, right? What is the thing that was modified, right? So we can take a look at the old value and we can take a look at the new value, and then make notes of those changes, right? Or whether we insert, if there's a brand new insert into the employees table, we want to just notify and read that there was a new employee that was inserted into the record, right? And we want to keep track of the employee number, right? And put that into our audit table, right? So that we track of what's happening with all these folks, okay? Now, we don't have, in the current assignment that we haven't asked you to work on triggers. We're going to leave that for the next assignment. We'll have a chance to play around with that as well, and we'll give you an example on how to use it, and then we'll ask you to do that on your own. Okay. All right, folks. That's all I have for you. Any questions?
Hello, Professor?
Yes.
I have a question. So there are a lot of keywords. Is there a place online where I can just like easily look them up and then see what they mean?
I'm sorry, say it again.
So there are a lot of keywords, SQL keywords. I was wondering if there's a place online where I can look them up and then actually just find the documentation for those keywords and how to use them or how to
I mean,
combine them.
the best if is if you go to MySQL documentation, right? They have a list of all the keywords and all the statements. So that's definitely the best way to be. But I'll send a link and I'll add it to Canvas. That's a good idea to make it available for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Are you also going to release a quiz answer today?
I will. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Garen, did you have a question?
Yeah, but it was more like private.
Okay. You wanna text me and we can chat?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Okay. Cheers. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Thank you, Professor.